I'm out this afternoon looking at our neighbor's spot here, our shared pond and high tunnel food to forest project, and specifically looking at the pond, which is still quite low. We had a very dry, very hot early part of the summer, and maybe to your eye it looks dangerously low. To my eye it is low and is now actively refilling. This is a pond that refills from the ground up. We nicked sand, a water-bearing layer of sand about a handful of feet, 6 to 8 feet down, and so when there's water upslope, it's able to recharge from underneath, which gives us the cleanest, clearest, coldest water. And today I wanted to look at how this is refilling and some changes in the landscape before some rains that I think has facilitated this. By design, we intended this pond to not have a huge amount of landscape, surface landscape as water catchment, because the idea was because we had access to the sweetness of being on a hill here where if we got deep enough, water would percolate up from the bottom. That's our preference. Keep it always filling from the bottom up, so it's very cold. It's filtered by the earth. And so we took the subsoil that came out of this pond initially and went upslope and created this huge smoothed out berm. This is many hundreds of yards of material spread out, and that actually is a speed bump from water rushing down the slope during torrential rains, grabbing nutrient, grabbing silt and soil and sending it into the pond, and rather having it stop upslope and percolate. Got sticker stuck on my hand. My pointing hand was dirtied. Have it percolate from underneath, go down into the earth, and then under pressure eventually push up. And so when we look at this driveway, when we get immense rains, even small amounts of rain, this is a non-permeable surface, sheet flow happens on our north-facing slope. It flows down the driveway, and there'd be a temptation to say, well, let me just dig a trench in the driveway and dig a trench through this yard or through the mowed area here and just send all that water right into the pond. Wouldn't that be great? Yeah, but then we're taking the surface flow of whatever drippings there are on this driveway, the heat, the nutrients, and sending it again to the top of the pond, the surface, the shallow parts. And so what I realized I could do in the last heavy rain that was coming through, I was watching rivulets running down through the driveway, and rather than sending it raw and straight into the pond, I made a water bar up slope here. You can see I'm going up, I don't know, 30 yards, 40 yards or so. And so here's this driveway now has a water bar. You can see it actively doing the work of receiving water from further upslope, and rather than rushing down the driveway, it now hits this impediment, which is still drivable, and brings it across the driveway. You can see it flowing here at a nice gentle pace, and instead of going directly to the pond, we're going across the yard here and having it deposit in this random spot. And so what happens is the water's rushing through or trickling through and infiltrating down into the soil up here. We're above the slope of deposition from the subsoil that made the pond. The pond is on the other side of that, and all of this driveway water is now being infiltrated. It's being slowed and spread and sunk into the soil up here, slowly working its way down into the aquifer, into the sand layer, 8 feet down, 10 feet down, what have you, and then moving across with gravity, pulling it down slope and coming up into the pond later on. And that little bit of digging work done during a rainstorm, I just wore rain gear and did it so that I could get real-time feedback of where the water was willing to flow, was rushing into here this morning as we had more rain, and now every drop of water is soaking down into the earth here, perched above that watershed. And if I follow this down, there's absolutely no way, no matter how intense of a rainstorm, that the water on the surface would jump this berm of soil at this point. But I'm following the path it's most likely taking underground now, slowly, steadily, recharging the aquifer, recharging the water table, increasing total water pressure deeper down in the earth. And as it moves down the slope underground, this is the first location on its way further downslope that it's able to release, and so a huge amount seems to be bubbling up. I went swimming in here the other day and the water had become noticeably colder, especially down low. I don't have any sciencey tools to measure the temperature down there or to know for sure that water's coming up, but the body tells you pretty quickly that, boy, there's water coming up from the earth when you dive into a body of water that's recharged from down below. And that stone had about 4 or 5 inches of missing water a few days ago. So the water level has gone up about 3 to 4, maybe 4 or 5 inches. Maybe I'll mark it to see if it continues to rise without additional rainfall. But we're not in a rush for it to fill up in an hour. We want it to fill up slowly and steadily. And every time there's an inch of rain or a quarter inch or 3 inches of rain, that all the water upslope in that watershed can be drawn across the landscape and infiltrated to recharge the earth, to bring the water back up, ice cold, filtered, and ready to swim. In some ways it shouldn't be a big deal at all. In fact, it isn't. It only was about 15 minutes of digging during the rain to make this shift, and super adjustable. It could be erased pretty easily. In fact, it probably will when the snowplow comes through this winter, but we can always redo it next year. We could also commit some tubes underground, of course, but then that costs money, and once it's underground it's harder to see what's happening. So it's nice to start with these free, fast, easy solutions to redirect water. But again, the temptation is to get the water to go right into the pond, but it's so much nicer to get it to infiltrate upslope of the pond and work its way down through the earth and get filtered and in. A lot of this water is coming from the roof area of this big old barn in the back of my neighbor's spot. We're going to work today on getting gutters along this north line. It's a few thousand square feet of roof metal that with 10 or so IBC totes, we should have all the water we need for irrigation without having to ask anything of the pond. And the overflow of that system can then be directed more directly, more accurately to where we want it. So for now, we're going to figure out a gutter system and all that, and where these IBC totes go, but that's for another day. For now, a little shovel work begets many thousands of gallons of water that are filtered by the earth.